like your army?
I look forward to seeing them in action.
They'll do their job well. I'll guarantee that.
Losing his parents to civil war at a young age, Jango Fett was quickly adopted by the Mandalorians, who ruled on his homeworld of Concord-On. He did not take up bounty hunting until midway through his young life, initiating the profession after Death Watch, a subset and opposing faction of the Mandalorians, dismantled and overtook Mandalorian rule, crafting a scheme that led to the Battle of Galadron. For the next 2 decades, Fett quickly became an infamous bounty hunter, the host of a clone army, and one of the most feared men in the galaxy.
Cad Bane at your service. I'll take on any job for the right price.
During the same time, there was another up-and-coming bounty hunter. With not-so-humble origins from New Tiana, Cad Bane knew the importance of reputation. Bane wanted to make a name for himself, and he wanted to do it quickly, targeting a Jedi for one of his first hits. The mark turned out to be a false Jedi, but Bane's appetite for the profession had yet to be satisfied. His ambition was noted by the Sith Lord, Darth Sidious, who commissioned Bane throughout the Clone Wars, including an infiltration into the Jedi archives. Where Jango Fett left a void in the bounty hunter circle, Cad Bane filled it, and then some. But if these two did live to see each other in open conflict, who would come out on top? For this video, I will be examining these characters as they appear in the Star Wars canon and Legends continuity. For Jango Fett, I will be observing him up until Attack of the Clones, utilizing Legends material such as the Dark Horse comics, the Jango Fett video game, and other subsequent sourcebooks. For Cad Bane, I will be examining him up until Season 4 of the Clone Wars, utilizing Legends material like the comics and short stories. When looking at Jango Fett and his physical accomplishments, we have to observe his fight against the Jedi during the Battle of Galadron. After Jango's squad was killed by reflected blaster fire, he ordered them to switch to projectiles and hand-to-hand. Though his squad perished, Jango survived, killing 6 Jedi with his bare hands. This feat would place Jango amongst his great Mandalorian ancestors, Mandalore the Destroyer, the Ultimate, and the Preserver, who also contended with Jedi, using only their martial skill. While the Jedi Jango faced were nameless knights, the feat was still significant, and it's further bolstered by Jango's contention with the famed Jedi Knight, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Even the great Jedi Master Mace Windu feared and respected Jango's lethality, tormented by nightmares at the start of the Clone War. Unlike Boba Fett, who was trained by his father, or Bosch, who was trained by the Bounty Hunters Guild, Cad Bane taught and trained himself. With this, I do not believe he was practiced in the ways of Tiras Kasi, or any other non-Jedi martial art. However, he did display his skill with standard hand-to-hand combat, wherever he learned it from. That said, it's not likely that close quarters combat was his priority. Though he was not trained by bounty hunters, or the Mandos, it was common knowledge for a bounty hunter to engage their target at close range, only as a last resort. Comparing the two on physical terms, I initially favored Jango. He has a natural advantage as a human, who are more physically robust and adaptable than Duros. As a Duros, Cad Bane was not noted for his physical strength. Most Duros had an affinity for mathematics and space travel, rather than mercenary work. There is also the case of Cad Bane's breathing tubes. No sources have stated the use of his breathing apparatus, but he is able to breathe without them. It's likely he used them for harsh conditions, rather than a respiratory supplement. But when looking at the achievements of Fett and Bane, they aren't astronomically far off. While Jango has taken on half a dozen nameless Jedi, Bane has contended with Ahsoka Tano, who, while only a Padawan, was a noted physical opponent and likely a challenge or a superior of those nameless Jedi, at least individually. Keep in mind, Kamari Vosa was only a Padawan during the Battle of Galadron as well. Yet there is still the case that Jango Fett contended with a fully realized Jedi Knight in Obi-Wan Kenobi. Using his brute strength and his Mandalorian commando skills, he was able to go square up against the Force user. And while Bane did incapacitate Kenobi, it was by means of his equipment, rather than his physical skill or might. And that was usually the case for Bane. His physicality was supplemented by his equipment. While Jango can go toe-to-toe through his own natural and brutal physicality, Bane didn't quite stack up in the same way. While my first thoughts went to Jango almost immediately, there is also credit for Bane that cannot easily be overlooked. Even so, on a pure physical level, Jango Fett gets the slight edge for his physical skill and attributes. The Mandalorians prided themselves on their ability to survive and thrive without weapons or armor. But in a bit of a paradox, their warlike society was also based around them. As such, Jango Fett was highly trained and highly skilled with these tools of war. Likewise, much like the bounty hunters of his time, Cad Bane carried a surplus of weapons and was outfitted with the most up-to-date equipment. According to the Attack of the Clones visual dictionary, Jango's Wester 34 blasters sacrifice high capacity for a high rate of fire at close range. It's the Lorian alloy preventing the gun from overheating. It was this rate of fire that made Jango so effective against Jedi adversaries. Cad Bane's LL-30 blast tech pistols were virtually identical and equally effective against Jedi, so there really is not an advantage to either of their primary weapons, though Jango's blasters had the added effect of an electromagnetic connection between his gloves, enabling him to reach for his blasters at a distance. Still, the advantage is circumstantial rather than definitive. As for their secondary weapons, Jango and Bane used multi-purpose gauntlets. Their gauntlets mirrored each other with their cable launchers, darts, and flame projectors. But Jango had sharp blades that sprung from his gauntlets, though Bane had bolas, gas, and a taser setting outfitted in his. And for this, Cad Bane gets the slight edge for his gauntlets. Both bounty hunters also make use of different types of jetpacks, Jango with a more traditional rear-mounted rocket pack, and Bane with ankle-mounted rocket boosters. Though it would seem that Bane's rocket boosters gave him more mobility, they seem to be a fair bit slower than Jango. And in terms of positioning and evasion, Jango would have the advantage, able to jet away faster than Bane, though at the sacrifice of lateral movement. A Mandalorian's armor and their T-shaped visor helmets were the primary symbols of their culture, a symbol that would last from the Old Republic to the Galactic Empire and beyond. During the height of the Jedi and Mandalorian conflict, most Mandalorian warriors wore Beskar iron, one of the most resilient alloys in the galaxy, known to repel the power of a lightsaber. However, during the time of Jango Fett, Beskar was hard to come by, and the modern bounty hunters opted for less traditional armor plating. Though keeping to the Mandalorian-style armor, Jango's plating was made of Durasteel, one of the most common alloys in the Star Wars universe. Jango's armor protected him against blaster bolts, light laser fire, and kinetic impacts. What's more, Jango's helmet was outfitted with sound and motion sensors, giving him sharpshooting schematics, much like a modern sniper rifle scope. By contrast, Cad Bane wore a trench coat. Besides his gauntlets and his rocket boosters, he wore breathing tubes as previously mentioned, but he had no additional protection or augmentation in terms of armor or helmet. Therefore, Jango gets the comfortable edge here, and ultimately, it wins him the edge in this category. True, Bane has advantages with his electrified gloves, but he'd need to get in close on Jango to begin with, and then get past Jango's superior martial skill. Bane also has his use of gas, but Jango's helmet would serve as some sort of protection against such an attack. But as it stands, full-body Durasteel armor, a stronger jetpack, and state-of-the-art helmet augmentations leans more favorable to Jango Fett. Jango was initially trained as a Mandalorian warrior, whose tactics revolved around a squad, rather than the individual. But Jango took no issue altering from a team mentality to a solitary mentality. It can even be argued that Jango wasn't very good in a group setting to begin with, as the true Mandalorians fell under his leadership, and the Battle of Galadron left him as a sole survivor, with no one else on his side. As a bounty hunter, he was extremely successful, using combative tactics to capture his targets. Jango knew the most basic and important rule of weapon choice, starting with the long-range weapons, like snipers, mid-range weapons like pistols, and close-range weapons like knives and bare hands. This is highlighted best in his entry in the Death Watch section of the Bounty Hunter Code, where he notes that adding every possible weapon to one's arsenal is not the best idea, and Jango's whole career was based around applying the right tactics at the right time. With regards to his combat with Jedi, again, we look at his fight with Kenobi, where he made sure to keep his distance, only engaging the Jedi hand-to-hand when there was no other options. And when facing the Jedi on Galadron, he used the environment to his advantage, bridging the gap between their force powers. It's one thing to have dozens of weapons, it's another thing to be skilled with said weapons, but it's a whole different thing on how one uses those items. Lucky enough for Cad Bane, he was an expert in all these concepts. Like a true bounty hunter, Cad preferred stealth and surprise tactics to a head-up assault. He was extremely cautious and always calculating his chances in combat. As an inverse to Jango, Cad did have better displays of leaderships in group settings, leading several missions that included a handful of bounty hunters. Granted, Bane did not always care for what happened to his comrades, but he did use them well to achieve his own ends. On hunts, he was always looking for his opponent's weaknesses, especially his Jedi adversaries. The Clone War Encyclopedia states that Bane respected, but did not fear, the power of the Jedi. He used their reliance on the Force against them, forcing them to be, quote, overconfident and careless. We have seen how Cad Bane has equalized himself with the Jedi, even taking on some of the best, not just because of his toolset, but when he decided to use them. Bolas were used for distraction, his pistols were used to keep Jedi preoccupied, and his flame projector would be used to finish them off, and he always had the ability to fall back on his rocket boosters. So what are the key differences between Jango and Cad's combative tactics? They were both accomplished bounty hunters, they both knew the importance of specific weapons in specific situations, and they both knew how to use their weapons with expertise. So perhaps the difference is how they applied their tools and strategies. For Jango, he seemed to be a bit more reactive than Bane, applying his different sets of tools when he had no other options, which may have led to his ultimate death. When fighting Mace Windu, he did not realize his jetpack was no longer working, and instead of flying away, as he did against Kenobi, he was left stuck to the ground without a head. Cad Bane was a bit more proactive, actively using his large set of weapons to defeat his foes, bringing the fight to them, forcing them to cope with his overwhelming assault, rather than waiting to see what his opponent would do first. Cad Bane's tactics, much like his personality, was controlling, and he made sure to maintain that control. Even when he did not, he was capable of adapting on the fly, bailing and resetting when an outright onslaught would not get the job done. It's not as though Jango cannot adapt on the fly, but I do favor Bane's more proactive offense than his own. Though the advantage is slight, Cad Bane gets the edge for his combat and tactical abilities. Jango Fett and Cad Bane never truly challenged each other, though they did live at the same time. When Jango was at his height, Cad Bane was still an up-and-coming bounty hunter, and just as he was coming into his own, Jango Fett went and got himself, well, killed. So their paths never crossed. But in this hypothetical scenario, let's say they do meet each other, and they do confront each other. Who would win? Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place in the box, with a few outcroppings for basic cover. The following is a hypothetical explanation of the possible outcomes. The early fight would be a standard trade of blaster fire, Jango with his Wester 34s, and Cad with his LL30s. Standard bounty hunting procedure would see the pair finding cover as quickly as possible, blasting covering fire more than aimed shots. But going back to the specifications of their guns, the advantage lies in their skill, which is relatively equal. However, in the early fight, there will be a 2-to-1 advantage to Jango. Their guns are basically the same, and their skill was tantamount, but Jango's helmet schematics, which included aim assist software, would give him the slight edge in the early fight, though the match ending so quickly is unlikely. Once in cover, Cad Bane might start taking his own edge, using his weapons to their full effect, throwing out bolas, cable launchers, and flame projectors to get Jango out of cover. Jango's answer will be his jetpack, flying away to regain position on Cad, but it would also leave him exposed. Bane's tactics will be effective, and they would even subvert Jango's own for a slight majority, but Jango's superior armor will make up for any small slip-ups he might perform. In the mid-fight, Jango would take another 2-to-1 advantage. Cad Bane would do a better job of pressing an offensive advantage, but I'm uncertain he can follow through or finish Jango off, especially when Jango has superior armor and a superior jetpack, a jetpack that can be used in explosive retaliation. The best Bane can hope for is an outright mistake on Jango's part, which is unlikely for this seasoned hunter. The late fight might see a close-range engagement, with Cad trying to work his way closer to Jango, utilizing his gas and electrified gauntlets. But again, Jango has answers for both these things, by way of his helmet and his hand-to-hand combat training. But I do believe Cad Bane's best bet would be those electrified gloves, as it's the best tool against a fully armored Jango. The issue is breaching Jango's guard, which is near impossible when he will be firing on Bane the whole time. One method for Bane might be to use his bolas to disable Jango's movements, but for that to be effective, he'd have to get past Jango's jetpack, which could still be used to escape, even if captured in bolas. On top of that, he'd need to disarm Jango of his weapons, and if he's able to do all these things, he'd still need to watch out for Jango's serrated gauntlets and flame projector. Simply put, in the late fight, Jango would take a 3-to-1 advantage for simply having too many answers for Bane's equipment, and there are too many circumstances that have to line up for Bane to be able to get past Jango's own weapons and armor for him to win. In all likelihood, after Cad Bane expends all his tricks, Jango would take the ultimate edge, disabling Bane with his pistols, rocket, or flame projector. Where Jango has answers for almost everything Bane can throw at him, Bane does not share the same advantages, and a lack of weapons that could effectively penetrate Jango's defenses, equipment, or skill, for a likely majority. And thus, after a 7-to-10 advantage, Jango Fett, Jaster's legacy, the host of the clone army, would be the most likely victor. Of course, this is all my opinion, based on the lore of Star Wars. Do you agree that Jango Fett would take a majority, or do you believe the cowboy bounty hunter is the most likely victor? Let me know in the comments below. Peace, love, and may the Force be with you. Always.